Well, in the appropriation bill, I have moved an amendment is under head 156 to reduce it about $85 million, which equals to the estimated expenditure in 2019 and 20 in relation to the Education Bureau's funding to entrust the Hong Kong EAA to implement a basic competency assessment. So $85 million is not just about the BCA, the basic competency assessment, but other ancillary expenditures. In relation to the service contract for providing the service, it expired in 2018. In order to continue to implement the policy initiatives, the Hong Kong EAA and the government has signed a new contract lasting till 2023. It amounts to $427 million. So for 2019-20 school years, the expenditure is about $85 million. That is the amount I ask to be cut in the appropriation bill. I represent the education sector, but we don't welcome all expenditures relating to education. Some we welcome very much, but there are others, say for example, this related to TSA. We don't think that the sum would help the education sector. On contrary, it will make things worse. We have to look into what's actually involved behind each expenditure before we can decide whether it's good or not.
The 85 million TSA expenditure will be divided into two parts. One part that is going to be directly done by the Bureau. In March last year, it was announced that there will be the 3 no's principle. 1, no student name. 2, no school name. 3, no school report. This will apply to all public primary schools in Hong Kong. And the students to be sampled would be only 10% of the relevant cohort in primary 3. We think that this is a good approach. If the $85 million will be devoted to this part alone, we will support it. But then, when this was announced, the Bureau left something unsaid simultaneously, and that is that schools would be able to apply to the Bureau to have the entire cohort of P3 students taking part. The Bureau is only asking to include 10% of the students. We know that that will not bring about any particular pressure to be borne on students or schools. But then the government also says that the schools can apply for the entire P3 cohort to be included. Then we are rather worried. First, do you have a good application system? Who will decide when to apply and whether they should apply? Will the parents be able to have a say? Will teachers have a say? The Bureau says no. It will be up to the non-professional, non-direct stakeholders, and that is for the board to decide. Now, it is an administrative-led body. It is not an academic body. Then why should the school management committee be able to decide? Even if you leave it to the school management board, because it has management powers, then shouldn't you at least consult the teachers and parents? That would be more reasonable. But then this is not required, that the school management body is not required to do any consultation. We believe this is against the spirit of school-based management. However, it is done in the name of school-based management. This is why school-based management is now in such a chaotic situation. Secondly, we ask, would there be good supervision? Say, for example, in the process, will there be pressure brought upon different levels, like pressure coming from above? Can the government at least do some post-process supervision and then solve the problems if they should arise? Unfortunately, the government says we will do very close supervision, but we'll just do what we have been doing. Well, what you have been doing has not been effective. If you are going to do what you have always been doing, then how can you say you are going to do strict supervision? It is just a kind of saying it, but it is vague and hollow, and it is not going to have any substance. Therefore, there is no good application system, no good supervision system. We believe the government is deliberate in allowing schools to, in a way, pressurize students into taking the TSA, and very often it starts with the school sponsoring bodies. The school sponsoring bodies and the principals are the ones who can make the decisions, so it is administrative-led. In 2018, 230 primary schools applied for having the entire cohort of P3 students taking TSA. It amounts to 40% of all primary schools in Hong Kong. What about 2019? The Bureau did not answer to such questions from the media. It did not respond to our questions either. It is not accountable at all. We think that this is rather outrageous. However, we still know something about the situation. Like Ming Pao asked about 20 school sponsoring bodies, and then they knew that at least the Hong Kong Catholic Diocese encouraged 52 primary schools to take part, and then Tonghua Group of Hospitals 13, the Buddhist Association 4, and then the Protestant church bodies 11. So in 2018, this has been done, and then in 2019, there are more primary schools having the entire cohort of students taking part. The sponsoring bodies positioning will have direct impact on the positioning of schools. And then the school sponsoring bodies may be under pressure because they are comparing the results between primary schools. This may not be direct, but then they would like to know. And then they will then use this as a tool to assess the school's performance. And then at the school management boards, there can be indirect pressure to be borne upon the headmasters, and then this will be transferred to teachers, and then teachers will put the pressure on students. So there will be pressure going from one to another, and eventually students will live under the shadow of TSA when they are in their junior and senior primary years. Last year, the PTU, or Professional Teachers Union, did a questionnaire with teachers. 80% of schools place emphasis or place a lot of emphasis on TSA results. And 85% of those who ask all the students in P3 to take part are in this category. The Bureau does not give us the numbers, but then from this survey we know from teachers that the pressure is still very high. And the survey also shows that in terms of drilling for the test, there is this serious situation. In other words, teachers would concentrate more time and effort on what is tested in TSA, and they may even neglect everything else, including courtesy and arousing students' interest in learning. This will not be reflected in TSA, and these may be overlooked. And maybe even some parts of some subjects will be neglected if they are not included in TSA. But then those parts might in fact be the important parts that should be taught. So why should we allow in primary schools that assessment should direct teaching? In fact, you should know that assessment should serve the teaching of students instead of having assessments directing the teaching. From the survey, we found that only in 10% of schools, teachers were able to have a part in deciding. And then amongst schools where the entire cohort of students sit in the test, there is not even 6% among such schools. And theoretically, as the government said, we should not place too much emphasis on the results in TSA. But then the fact is many schools are applying to have the entire cohort of students participating, and they also place a lot of emphasis on the results. Recently, from newspaper reports, we know that there is school which is attracting attention because something very unpleasant happened. This is a school which has the entire cohort of P3 students taking part, and they place a lot of emphasis on TSA results. The pressure from TSA is evidenced in factual reality. We don't know why the Bureau doesn't want to face up to this. Our primary schools are not given the opportunity to offer quality education. Very often, the officials and our teachers may go to Finland for a study tour. And then after that, we come back and do what we have always been doing. I hope we can now grasp the opportunity. There is a task force reviewing our curriculum as a whole. Next month, they will come to the Legislative Council to let us know their plans. P3 TSA is exactly or precisely a bottleneck in our primary school education. If we want to deregulate our curriculum and bring in improvements to our primary school education, then in this review we should take a hard look at P3 TSA. I hope this task force can allow our primary school students to breathe fresh air. If we can disapply having TSA engaging the entire cohort of P3 students, then that will be good. If not, we should abolish P3 TSA altogether. We should consider monitoring closely the application procedures for having the entire cohort of P3 students, and also we should review how you do your supervision. This is what the Bureau should do. And what is most important is that you should empower teachers to comment on the professional aspects in the school's decision-making process, and to ensure that what we do is to benefit students' learning. We should systematically consult and respect teachers' views. I also hope that the government can be accountable and let the Legislative Council know the number of schools having the entire cohort of P3 students taking TSA. President, at this point, P3 TSA is something we should face up to. This has everything to do with whether our students have a happy childhood and whether we have a quality pedagogical landscape. In this vote, I appeal to members to support my amendment. What is most important is to give this message to the government, hoping that they will bring in improvements.